Americans, what is something European that makes no sense to you? Story 1. In Germany, apartments don't normally come with a kitchen. It's purchased or installed by the tenant. Sometimes you luck out, but not usually. When we sold our house recently, a German woman viewed it and said, "This is a lovely kitchen. We'll be ashamed to see it go." I was like, "Go where?" She was so excited when I said we weren't taking the kitchen anywhere. My husband and I were so confused. She thought the house was a real catch because of it and was really shocked when the estate agent said that nobody takes their kitchens with them. Odd. As a German, I can assure you we all hate it. It's a thing that stayed from people in the 50s buying things, a kitchen, oven, etc., for life, back when things actually were built not to break down after the mandatory return period. The kitchen is the last thing I'd expect to be missing in an apartment. Story 2. No AC. Sure, fine, but then no screens on your windows so all the bugs get in? Not sure if this is all of Europe, but definitely in the UK. Also, no top sheets? The screens thing is so weird to me. The no AC forces you to open the windows. I stayed in the French countryside once in the summer. Keep the windows open at night. So many bug bites in the next morning. I don't get the no screen things at all. I'm super terrified of spiders, so my dad installed screens in about every window in our house and I buy them whenever I move. In Germany, we love luften, opening the windows at every opportunity, but there's no weather that doesn't invite bugs in. My parents had a Spanish exchange student living with them. He removed the screens from the windows to let nature in, as he put it to my mom, who was freaking out about the bugs. She told him we don't like nature in the US. We like nature, we just want it to stay outside. Story 3. I don't know if it's all Europeans, but Germans have a real big problem with staring like I owe them money. Also paying to use the bathroom in public spaces. Haha, we do stare a lot. When I went to study in the UK, one of my professors asked me during a tutorial whether he was saying the wrong things because apparently I kept staring at him. I didn't even notice it. But it's a sign of respect. They're listening intently, but the blank expression is off-putting. Germans are known as serious folks for a reason. Conversely, to not make eye contact is dismissive, and to make facial expressions is like mocking them, or the speaker might think you're a lunatic who can't calmly pay attention. Same thing in Russia. My Russian-born family moved to the US decades ago and got out of the habit, but they would always say how keeping eye contact with strangers, especially two guys looking at each other, was some sort of confrontation. It's like they either have disdain for me or are plotting my murder. Story 4. I'm from Europe myself and find it strange some people have carpet in their bathroom. It's disgusting. I did some renovations in a house with a carpeted bathroom a few years ago. When I pulled up the carpet, the underside was discolored several inches around the toilet and black right at the edge. Similar discoloration around the pipes that went into the floor. It was a half bath, and I can only imagine how hard or worse it would have been had there been a shower as well. I live in Canada. In 1977, my parents moved into a house that I call the Disco House. The Disco House had so many decorating atrocities. I'd love to see it on Zillow house shaming sites, but my mother undid many of the most mockable aspects. The second item to go was the bathroom carpet. It was a sort of royal and light blue fun fur carpet. You know the hair they use for troll dolls? That was the stuff. About 2 centimeters high. I was 8. I told my 3-year-old brother they skinned Cookie Monster and Grover and made him into a carpet. It was absolutely horrid to step onto it with wet feet. The 1970s. Too many drugs, not enough thought put into design. It's less and less common, but in the 1970s up until the 1990s, it became a status symbol since prior to that, wall-to-wall carpeting in a home was too expensive and usually reserved for the wealthy. When the prices went down due to manufacturing becoming cheaper, people who bought carpet sometimes did the entire house, bathroom included. The ones left are outdated holdouts who haven't had a reno since it was popular. I imagine many diseases were born out of carpeted bathrooms. Story 5. It's not that it makes no sense, but I've always been curious how carbonated water became the default in many places. Naturally occurring mineral water is often naturally sparkling. I think that culturally, Europe utilized these mineral springs more widely than early Americans, and so modern sparkling water was an easier sell there. They also believed that carbonated water was good for your health. This led to it being sold as a health beverage when they figured out how to make the stuff artificially. It even kinda was good for you, you, specifically because buying carbonated water from a pharmacy or something would be cleaner than the water from the tap. With drinking clean water being better for you than just about any other drink out there, you could actually consider it a healthier alternative to what they had. This health craze actually led to the rise of soda. I learned about this from writing a college paper on it, and now I know more about the history and industry behind soda than I ever needed to know. Historically, mineral water, not modern sparkling, actually can have health benefits. It's mineral-rich, hence the name, and thus can give your body a boost when you're feeling deficient. In the days when medicine was a bit more rudimentary, this often made it as good or better than whatever your local chemist was cooking up. The only way minerals in water could give your body a boost when you're feeling deficient would be if you were dehydrated. Story 6. The smoking. I stayed with a host family in France, and my 16-year-old host sister smoked like a chimney, as did all her friends. Like, you're so young. Why? Oh, try some time in Austria. It's like 1965 over there. For a clue on how pervasive smoking is, take a look at a restaurant, cafe, and bar pictures posted by reviewers. There's an ashtray at every table. Incredibly, smoking wasn't banned in public spaces until 2019. I'm Austrian. There is zero smoking in restaurants and cafes indoors nowadays. I have never seen anyone smoking inside since they banned it, which I find very good because I hated sitting in smoking areas. But you also have to say that even though the ban was pretty late, there already had to be separated with walls and doors smoking areas before the general ban. I agree though that this was way overdue, and all the restaurant owners screamed, "Nobody will go out eating anymore and we will all go broke because of this." Surprisingly, people still enjoy going to restaurants, and maybe non-smokers even enjoy it even more now, since they don't reek of smoke after it. Kids start smoking at very young ages because they think it's cool. At a certain point, they pick it up to be a part of the group. Later in life, they are either addicted and/or because of stress. Story 8. The poop shelf in Dutch/Belgian toilets. Instead of poop going straight down into the water, there's a shelf so your poop lands on it in case you want to inspect your poop. It gets pushed off by the water when you flush. Not everyone has one though. I think most toilets are the modern kind nowadays. There are 3 basic kinds of toilets. Inclined back, poop hits the inclined back and slides down into the water. Vertical, poop goes down directly into the water. And poop shelf, poop rests gently on the shelf. Disadvantages: poop gets smeared on the inclined back, skid marks, and needs to be scraped off if you leave it resting for longer than a minute or two. 2. Poseidon's kiss with every poop drop. 3. The shelf gets dirty and you will probably need to clean it as often as type 1. Longer poop requires that you stand up and let it fall on the shelf. Advantages: 1. Nice and clean for the butt. 2. No need to clean up skid marks. And 3. Easiest toilet to collect stool samples. Also, there's room for a proper siphon in the base, so it actually gets cleaned out better by a single flush than other types. Considering the disadvantage of type 1 and 2, I'd say there is a method to the madness of the poop shelf. No thanks, I'm fine without a poop shelf. Story 9. I'm Canadian, but it's always baffled me that some Europeans consider a half hour's worth of driving a long time. That wouldn't even get me out of the area I'd consider local. I moved from Germany to the Netherlands. The Netherlands is so small that the longest you could actually drive from one point to another is 4 hours. Otherwise, you would cross a border. When I was a child, I used to go to my grandparents' house every weekend. They only lived an hour away, so the way was short to me. My boyfriend is Dutch, and he told me he barely ever saw his grandma growing up because she lived so far away and they never visited her because of the long way. She lived 1.5 hours away. My coworkers from Switzerland came out to Denver, and I took them over to Glenwood Springs, which is about a 3.5-hour drive. And after about half an hour, they're like, "Are you okay to drive? Do you want one of us to drive for a bit so you can rest?" I drive 2 to 10 hours to go camping with my husband and 2 dogs at least 2 or 3 weeks a month. So this was just a normal weekend to me, but they were acting like I was some kind of crazy person. In America, 100 years is a long time. In Europe, 100 miles is a long distance. Story 10. Why do you guys like to put the bathroom light switches outside the bathroom? It has to do with the electrical regulations over here. Basically, we don't allow electricity within a certain distance of water source, and by placing the light switch outside, it means the electricity is outside the zone close to the water. It stops people with wet hands from getting electrocuted. You are allowed to pull a cord light switch inside the bathroom as you're pulling the cord and not actually touching anything with electricity going through it. This is the case for Norway. A bathroom and other rooms with floor drain are in the world of electricity classified as a wet room and are supposed to be installed with approved wet room equipment. If the light switch is on the outside, you can use regular switches and thermostats. As always, it's the safety regulations. Story 11. Charging for bathrooms and charging for water at restaurants are both things that I would have expected Americans to do and Europeans to be the ones making fun of it. Tap water is free. Bottled water and sparkling water are not, and the thing about toilets being charged is mostly public toilets. If you go to a toilet in a restaurant or a bar, it is free as far as I'm aware of. Paying to use a bathroom sucks, but at least I'm guaranteed to be able to walk into a bathroom if I have €1 on me. In New York, most bathrooms are in some kind of establishment, restaurant or cafe that would force me to purchase something if I want to use it. I have literally walked into a Starbucks and purchased a muffin out of desperation. I'm lucky if I see a hotel and can walk in pretending to be a guest to use their bathroom. As someone who needs to pee all the time, this really sucks. As soon as I sip just a bit of water, my day is ruined and I need to use the bathroom lots of times. When I plan to leave the house, I get used to skipping my drinks out of fear that I either can't find a toilet or that I need to pay for it over and over. Guess who developed kidney stones because of this habit? Ugh. Now I try to do better, but leaving the house stresses me out so much. Oh, and I also have IBS, so no eating when I plan to leave the house either. Nice little eating disorder this lack of toilets caused me, and then I need to pay for them when I find one. So frustrating. I am really jealous when I hear that American toilets are everywhere and free, and then I remembered that they have huge gaps in the door which would stress me out a lot, so I was a bit mollified. That sounds terrifying. Story 12. I'm from the Midwest and my family is from the Netherlands, so the society that wouldn't dare offend you in any way and the society that has no problem dropping truth bombs on you, it's rough. The infamous Dutch straightforwardness or directness. We have taught to tell it like it is. We will be polite and civil about it, but we have no time for beating around the bush when a problem has to be solved. That being said, some of my countrymen use it as an excuse to be rude asshats. My partner used to administer those role-playing candidate selection processes for senior management appointments. One of the systems she used was from the Netherlands, and it automatically produced a report to be given to the candidate afterward whether they got the job or not. Much of that report was whether or not the candidate met the criteria for that segment: qualifications, experience, attitude, where the given problems were solved, etc. Being Dutch, the state produced only two possibilities: adequate and inadequate. She had a hard time smoothing it over with any Irish guys for whom being described as adequate is an insult. I'm Dutch and really curious about what those truth bombs are. I do have to note that I haven't lived in Holland for a long time, 18 years, but when I did find many Dutch people unfriendly and impossible to befriend unless they were my parents' generation. Anyone younger and they were generally super unfriendly and cold. It is one of the reasons I emigrated to a friendlier country. Another thing I noticed when I used to be on American forums long ago was that Americans in general can be very easily offended over things, even if it's something I said about myself. To quote Ted Lasso, he's not an a-hole, he's just Dutch. Story 13. The cute-sounding police sirens. In America, the police sirens seem like an urgent, semi-deranged warning to GTFO of the way. Like, it's going down and I'm not there! Move! Meanwhile, every European police siren I've heard just kind of politely annoys you out of the way. Like, "Ee-doo, pardon me, but a spot of bother has occurred and I simply must hasten to it. Pardon me as I simply must attend it. Pardon me." And the police cars themselves are so small. American police cars are big and brawny, like they might need to make their own garage door into a building. The European police cars I've seen, where do they even put the people they arrest? Granted, I've only seen European police stuff on TV, so there's probably a lot I haven't seen. German police cars, at least in my area, are either a VW Golf or some kind of van. The intent is to be able to get through the sometimes very windy and small streets, while still being able to go 280. 170 in Freedom units, on the Autobahn. Also, the baddies go in the back seats, just like American cars. It's just a lot more cramped. Also, the sirens. I have never heard American sirens in person, only through games or movies, but to me, German police sirens sound a lot more urging than American ones. To be fair, compared to the fire truck sirens, they're chill. One weird thing I noticed from American police videos is people always get handcuffed, even if they're being arrested for a non-violent crime and they're not a flight risk. I can't speak for Europe, but in Australia, people rarely get handcuffed. They just get walked to the back of the paddy wagon and put in the back. It's basically a big metal cage on the back of a police car. I never really questioned the use of handcuffs before. I guess it's tradition. Story 14. You all give us so much grief for having bathroom stall door gaps and then having a 1 foot wide piece of glass to keep water in the shower. The UK had incredible toilet stalls, floor to ceiling doors, and total privacy, even in the nastiest pubs, which is why it is so perplexing that their urinals were the most vile I had ever seen. Cut a drain in the floor near a wall, suspend a cistern above it with a motion sensor and timer that would let a tiny trickle of water wash away the piss, but hasn't ever worked, and have the whole thing positioned so that everyone entering the bathroom sees a row of wangs first thing after opening the door. And the smell, because so many of them don't flush correctly, the smell is gag-inducing. Even in the nicest restaurants, this was a problem, and I do not know how you can do the toilet stall setup so well and fail so miserably on the urinals in the same establishment. I was at a hotel in France where there was a window in front of the shower without any concealment at all, facing a courtyard where people have drinks. Like, WTF? What if someone wants to take a shower at night? Are we supposed to give everyone a show? And there was the tiny glass wall that didn't stop the water from going everywhere. This was in a really nice hotel, too. In Italy, I remember having just a tiny bathtub with a water wand to hose off where it was impossible to even stand up for a shower at all. It reminded me of an animal bath at a veterinary office here in the US. I mean, who bathes like this? I truly do not understand European showers at all. Showers are always the biggest culture shock when you go abroad. Story 15. Was just in southern Italy and it was hot as balls, but everybody acted like they hated AC. We go out for the day and when we come back, housekeeping had turned off all the AC units. The driver wore a full suit, but every time we got in the car, the AC was off. We'd ask him to turn it on and he would put it on low. Ask him to blast it and he would for a minute, then sneakily turn it back down. It's like they're reptiles or something. I've lived in southern Italy for 5 years now and I can answer this one. For the house, AC will run your bills through the roof. Right now, the vast majority of Italian infrastructure runs on Russian gas, which is heavily embargoed and was expensive from the start. The owner of where you're staying is just saving money. The car is a bit weird. It does use a bit more gas to run the AC, but I've heard a couple of times a myth that running your AC in the car is likely to get you sick. This is only true if you never replace your air filters. With it being southern Italy, there's also a good chance that that is true. Many times I've picked a friend up and they were shocked I'm using my AC and were worried for my health. Hope that helps or at least explains what was happening. Central Italian here, definitely accurate explanations, especially the might get you sick. People fear that you can get all sorts of diseases from the flu to neck strains if you turn on the AC when you're sweaty. I personally prefer just driving with the window down unless it's truly unsustainably hot. I'm on the highway, but my car AC has been broken for years, so whatever. I also think it's acclimatization though, at least a bit. Now that I live in Central Europe, summer hot days for my colleague here feel normally pleasant compared to my summer hot days in Italy, where you break a sweat just by sitting in the shade and breathing. Cause the way people configure AC makes it incredibly uncomfortable because many times it creates a super cold airflow that only feels good for a couple of minutes before feeling like I'm in the winter waiting for pneumonia. In my experience, there are two types of people, those who love AC and those who can't stand how normally it's used. You want to turn on the AC? Sure, okay, but it's hot anyway. But please don't freaking put it at the coldest temperature possible with max airflow. It's hot, but not that hot. Thanks. I always thought it was weird that in the winter you need the room to be at 27 degrees, but in the summertime it can't be higher than 19. I can relate to this. My family is not accustomed to air conditioning and they think that ACs make you catch a cold. Story 16. Brits, your sinks with two separate faucets are inferior and dumb. Filling the wash basin to wash is gross. I don't know if any of you actually like your sinks either though. I'm European but went to uni in the US and got used to having outlets available in the bathrooms at home. It's a bit of a pain given electric toothbrushes, shavers, hairdryers, etc. now running between rooms. They're more common now in construction buildings, but in a lot of the older homes, you're lucky if you have one outlet in the medicine cabinet. I was taught to wash dishes this way. Fill the wash basin. In school in the US. And personally, I think it is superior. The dishes get to soak before I get to them and it makes it much easier to wash. Story 17. Rent their whole lives. I saw this in Germany. I know it's becoming the norm in the US too, but it just seemed weird to me the first time I visited 30 years ago that most Germans rented their entire lives and never even thought about buying a house. In the US, buying a house is a bit of a social safety net. There's the idea that you can invest in a house for a profit, or even failing that, once you have a house paid off, it'll be yours forever, and that's the ticket to financial stability. In countries with a better social welfare net, you probably don't have to worry about being homeless if your landlord raises rent by 50%. Economic incentives. In the US, force the average American to buy a home. If you do, you'll have a mortgage paid off by the time you retire. Way cheaper than renting at that point, as you only pay property taxes, and you have a little cash cow to draw from when be taken care of and can no longer work. In most of Europe, the state will subsidize your housing and give you insanely cheap medical care when you're retired. No need for a cash cow. That, plus the density thing, and houses/apartments to buy in Germany are just insanely expensive. Economically, it doesn't pencil out to buy when renting is so affordable, comparatively. Buying a house is pretty much a part of the American dream. It's a rite of passage for adults. Story 18. England's fascination with large print flowered wallpaper, with various colors that don't go together, especially when you stand in the hallway and see where all the rooms converge. Definitely outdated now, but you are right. I have a family who had patterns on the floor, sofas with patterns on little sleeves to protect the arms, wallpaper, curtains, little palmettes around the top of the curtains, Artex ceiling. It was such a mess. All in drab colors too. As a reaction, everywhere went super minimal for a while, with a trend for single feature wall, heavy on pattern to break this up. But I think we are at a happy medium now, more about practicality and keeping original features than being overly fussy. For how much Europeans love aesthetics, the flower wallpapers really don't make sense. Story 19. Why the hell don't you guys just serve tap water, if it's okay to drink, to tables when they sit down? I'm currently in Europe and a handful of restaurants will not even serve you tap water and you have to buy it. This is in many countries too. WTF, it's free and right there. ETA, my comment was about dining in restaurants. Nobody is expecting to walk into a restaurant and receive free water service without ordering food. I'm specifically talking about the refusal of tap water alongside the purchase of a meal. I once argued with a waitress in Germany over wanting tap water and not bottled water. I don't see the point in wasting plastic when there is potable tap water available. I kept saying tap water is fine and she was so upset with it. She finally brought me a glass that was practically a thimble. Meanwhile, she brought my friend's dog an entire giant bowl of water. Also, my tangentially related answer to this question, my problem with Europe is the lack of free accessible potable water. In every airport in the US, museum and zoo, there are water refill stations, or you can get a cup of water if you ask. But in Europe, you have to buy bottles of water instead and can't get free water. Just find a tap anywhere. As long as it's not explicitly stated that it isn't for drinking, it is safe to drink. And even then, it's mostly safe, just means it's not regularly monitored. I agree though, water infrastructure could be much better. There was a campaign in London a few years ago to insist on having tap water for free as opposed to buying bottled water. So in London restaurants, they generally will offer still sparkling, paid for, or tap free. If they don't, you can ask for it anyway. In other European countries, this is far less common. You have to pay for water as an extra. No idea why they don't give tap water there, especially as it's drinkable in most places. Water of all things should be free. It literally costs the establishment nothing at all. Story 20. When it comes to societal norms, I typically think Europeans are a bit further ahead than Americans, but there is one thing I think Americans nipped in the bud, and that's cigarettes. It's crazy to me how popular cigarettes still are in Europe. Granted, vaping is big in the US, but seeing a person under 35 smoking a cigarette in the US is borderline shocking at this point. Yeah, it's a miracle. We sued the evil big tobacco, and all these states got money, and we changed the norms from nearly half of all adults smoking to now around 20% and 10% in Cali. The same thing should be happening now with opiates, but the Americans don't trust public health, and the GOP has done everything it can to undermine collective programs because, social. Rant from a former tobacco control professional is now over. I'm currently on vacation in Montreal, and I was taken back by all the smokers. Where I live in the US, I pretty much don't see smokers ever. Classic Quebec still thinks it's part of Europe. Story 21. Do any Europeans have a clothing dryer? Why do I think that's not standard? I don't have one, Brit, but I have a couple of friends who do. They're not expensive to buy, but generally we consider them expensive to run, when drying racks and outdoor lines are free. The Netherlands reporting here, a lot of people here too think that dryers are expensive to run, but many of those haven't got the memo that modern dryers are a heck of a lot more efficient than they used to be. Many people dry their clothes on a rack or a line, but hanging them outside requires decent weather, and hanging them inside requires space inside. I live in a tiny apartment. I wouldn't know how to live without a dryer. And the energy usage is less than 1 kilowatt hour per cycle, and it rarely runs more than once a week. Leaving clothes out to dry in Western Europe weather, that's risky. Story 22. Your obsession with our politics. When traveling in Europe, the second someone figures out I'm American, they start asking me what I think of the president or chastising me for how crappy our country is. Your politics is amusing to Europeans. Why do you watch reality TV? That's what it appears to be to most Europeans. It's a smug interest, but it's incredibly tribal and weird. The two sides are both wackos, whereas most European politics are a snooze fest. Also, your election seasons are never ending and packed with bizarre characters and even more bizarre campaigns. Compared to the majority of EU elections, they start about 1 month before the election date, followed by many months of backroom boring coalition negotiations. It's reality TV on steroids. Your candidates are insane. The entire process brings out the worst in both candidates, their parties, the media, and of course, the voters. The discussion online is ridiculous, with zealots on both sides getting more extreme as the campaigns progress. To top that off, we get to think of all the ways we will be impacted by the next leader of the free world. All incredibly entertaining. Story 23. Europeans seem pretty content with their position in life and seem to accept that people won't change their class or status. Maybe that's just who I have met though. Well, I think that's because in most of the EU, poor does not equal unable to survive and have a moderately happy lifestyle. Less and less now with the cost of living crisis and renting costs, but in general, you could be content just with any full-time job. I think in the US, you can be far poorer, and that's naturally a big motivator to increase class. I always see comments online saying, "You're a poor," or mentioning how much wealthier the average American is. But having lived in the US, I didn't see so much of a difference in consumption or visible signs of wealth among the lower middle class and middle class. People have cars, iPhones, and mortgages, or family-appropriate housing. I think that really depends on who you ask. In my social group, people mostly want to reach more than their parents, but there are plenty of people who don't have that much ambition. I think that is more common with poor people, but to be fair, I don't think this is any different in the US. People with inherited riches also lack ambition usually. Story 24. For lack of a better word, it seems like Europeans are kind of mean, rude, or distant with people they don't know. Like there is a bigger difference in the distance and closeness and coolness or friendliness with people you don't know than there is in the US, where people are kind of warm and friendly with strangers. And once you strike up a conversation and get to know someone in Europe, it seems like you are more bonded than you would be in the US. Like we made friends with a man who has a shop where he makes and sells fine paper in Florence, because in a massive coincidence, we had seen some of his paper for sale in the US. He only sells to 2 shops in the country, and we watched as he literally turned his back on paying customers and talked to us for about 20 minutes. That's another thing. Shop workers seem kind of scowly in Europe. My roommate hired a young French woman to work in his barbecue restaurant, and when people would ask if they had fries, she would just say no while maintaining direct eye contact. No smile, no sorry, no may I suggest the cornbread? Just no, and a hard stare. On the other hand, I heard a story about a European man in the US. He was waiting at a bus stop when an American man struck up a friendly conversation with him. They talked and laughed and found they had all sorts of things in common. So the European guy thought they were like brothers. When the bus came and the American said goodbye and sat separately, he was so hurt and confused. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. But please remember to be respectful. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and don't forget to subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.